Washington Journal continues.
Joining us today is former presidential candidate Congressman Dennis Kucinich from the Cleveland area. Good morning, Congressman. Thanks for being with us. You're going to be testifying later this morning before the House Judiciary Committee on President Bush and executive authority. What's your message?
That when the White House brought to the Congress a resolution asking for the authorization to use force against Iraq, it made many representations to the Congress that Iraq was an imminent threat, that it had weapons of mass destruction and was working to develop nuclear weapons, and that Iraq had the intention and capability of attacking the United States. Every averance that was made in those claims turned out not to be true.
Was it, do you think it was known in advance, or was this just misinformation or poor intelligence?
Let's look at both possible scenarios. There was plenty of information available on a public record at the time, and available certainly to the administration, which has this vast intelligence network available to it, to suggest that what they were telling the Congress was either unverifiable or was in fact not true. Now, that is a grave offense. But let's suppose, for the sake of discussion, that they were just wrong about everything, and that the mistakes resulted in the deaths of 4,127 of our troops, over 1 million innocent Iraqis, a cost to our country of about $3 trillion long term. That in itself would be an impeachable offense. So either way, either story they want to pick, they have a problem in terms of accountability.
If you look at the Constitution and analyze the phrase high crimes and misdemeanors, how do you define that?
Well, it would seem that a high crime is something that would involve anything that resulted in the deaths of innocent people. That would absolutely be. I mean, you think about it. What's our responsibility? Or who's responsible for the deaths of a million innocent Iraqis? I mean, there was an aggressive war waged, and the whole program was laid out, shock and awe, and the bombing that took place and the subsequent occupation that led to even more deaths. There has to be responsibility for that. It was the President of the United States, as Commander-in-Chief, who directed the forces after they made representations to Congress that this was necessary to do. And it wasn't necessary. It was unprovoked. It was unjustified. And that's the testimony that I'm going to give in front of Judiciary.
Our phone lines are open. By the way, we will have live coverage of the House Judiciary Committee chaired by John Conyers, Democrat of Michigan. You can also email us, journal@cspan.org. Congressman, let me throw out one scenario. 20 years from now, Iraq is a bastion of democracy, a place of stability in the Middle East, and a close ally of the U.S.
The ends don't justify the means unless you're in a state of moral depravity. I mean, we didn't have any right to attack that country, but the White House, and the President in particular, laid out a case that we should, and we had to, that it was in our national security's interest. Well, you know what? That was wrong. And we don't have the right to pick the governments that other people should have. We don't have a right to have an empire. That was not what America was about when it was founded. It was founded as a republic, if you could save it or keep it. And we've strayed from that mightily. And to wage an aggressive war against innocent people is something that is a high crime by definition. And so the case that I'll present today to the Judiciary Committee is going to be focused very tightly on what it is that the Congress was told in October of 2002, the representations that were made that induced Congress to vote to support the authorization for the use of military force against Iraq.
And as you well know, really over the last 30 to 35 years, we've seen an escalation of presidential authority, just the power of the presidency itself.
Other people will testify to that. You know, in my 5 minutes, I'm going to focus on a set of facts that were untrue at the time they were told, or a set of representations that were untrue at the time that they were communicated to Congress. And now everyone knows that Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction, had nothing to do with 9/11 or Al-Qaeda's role in 9/11, did not have the intention or capability of attacking the United States. Let's go back to October 2002. That was the cause of war, and proved to be false.
And why, with 6 months remaining in his administration, are you continually pushing for impeachment?
Well, if we don't hold this president accountable, the next president could take even more license. We're setting a threshold for presidential conduct here for being able to wage war and circumvent Article 1, Section 8, and look at the consequences of this war. You know, this war has not been without consequences. over 4,000 dead troops, 1 million innocent Iraqis have perished. Our domestic economy is being destroyed by this. We're borrowing money to fight this war and paying high interest for it. The war, the central cause of the war, I think, or purpose of the war was to be able to grab Iraq's oil. So we have our troops out there to be able to enable the oil companies to successfully get $5 a gallon gasoline from the American people. I mean, what is this all about? What's happened to our country? I mean, these are the kind of things that I'm going to raise in the committee today.
If you've just joined us, or if you're listening on C-SPAN Radio, our guest is Congressman Dennis Kucinich. Our phone lines are open, 202-737-0002, the line for Democrats, and 202-737-0001 if you're a Republican. Auburndale, Florida, first up. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Kucinich. I am a Republican. I voted for George Bush 2 times. I am very sorry about my vote, and I thank you for doing this impeachment procedure. I'm just appalled at what has been happening there. I've been following worldreports.org for the last 2 years, and I just thank you for doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I don't see this as a Democrat or Republican issue. I mean, there's some type of thinking that says that Democratic leadership doesn't want to hold President Bush accountable at this point because it'll help to sink the Republicans even further in November. I think that we have an obligation to the Constitution. And one other point is that, look, this administration is building a case for a war against Iran. And the alleged fact pattern that they're laying out is not dissimilar to what they were saying about Iraq 6 years ago.
Have you had any private conversations with the Speaker of the House?
On occasion I've talked mostly to her staff. I've told her staff and I have been in constant contact. She's a very busy person. On the floor of the House, her staff's very accessible. I've let them know every step that I would be taking along the way.
And her reasoning for not bringing this to the floor?
Well, I think that's something that she would have to share with the American people. She hasn't shared it with me privately. I would say that I think that even prior to her becoming Speaker, she made a case very strongly that impeachment was off the table. And I would hope that in reflecting upon what's happened since then, the administration ignoring subpoenas of Congress, not producing documents that have been asked for, essentially arrogating to itself even more power with signing statements, that we've seen that it wasn't a wise choice to make to say that we're not going to hold this president accountable.
18 months into her tenure, has she been the Speaker you expected that she would be?
I like Nancy Pelosi. She's a friend. She's somebody who I supported as the Speaker. I think this is a matter that hopefully after today's testimony she'll reconsider. I mean, keep in mind that this hearing today wouldn't have occurred unless she had agreed to have the hearing. So I think that's progress. But to me, it's not about Nancy Pelosi. And it's not about me, certainly. And in a sense, it's not even about George Bush. It's about the Constitution of the United States and whether or not the oath of office, which the President took, he actually abided by.
So, but as a steward of the Constitution, has she been a good Speaker?
You know, I think that she's done her best. And I also think that a Speaker doesn't act in a vacuum, that members of Congress have to provide to her the same kind of advice that a President would get from members of his Cabinet. And so I'm providing to her advice that I hope that she'll consider.
Next call on our independent line from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Good morning for Congressman Dennis Kucinich.
Good morning, Congressman. Thank you for taking my call. I would also like to thank you for what you've done, what you're going to do today, and the other witnesses that will be before the committee. I just recently finished the book, Lawless World. Did you ever read that one by Philip Sands?
I don't believe I have. You want to tell me a little bit about it?
Oh, well, it's really a good book. This is, I'm very nervous. This is an English lawyer. His specific area of expertise is international law. And this book doesn't give the benefit of the doubt that you initially did when you opened your conversation. The things that Bush had presented as evidence of the intimate danger that he proposed that Saddam was, he proves in this book that, in fact, they weren't. They were lying.